Good morning, everyone, or evening or afternoon, where you are. This is Story Engine 101 with Elizabeth Ann West. Hi. We're going to have fun this morning. We're going to take a look and see what Story Engine can do with historical fiction and maybe some YA fantasy, if we can get to that as well. So let me go ahead and share my screen and we will talk about it. Okay, so this is actually a different project that I was working in. Let me go back to my homepage. So Story Engine, and people can see I've been breaking my own rule with some untitles here. Story Engine is available in every single project that you have on Sudowrite. So I'm going to click this new button and I'm going to go ahead and change this untitled so I can name it, because if you don't, you end up with what I just showed, 2 cards with untitled, and I have no idea what they are. Story Engine 101, and this is June 21st, 2023 for me. Now, one hack that I've shown people is that you can kind of hack it to show what a project is, because whatever's in that first document, it'll tell you. So if I wanted to go that we're going to do some historical fiction and YA, when I come back to my homepage here, now it'll actually show that on that card. The secret to that is that there has to be something in your first document for it to show up on the card when you're on your homepage. All right, I'm going to go ahead and click right into Story Engine. Now, Story Engine's designed to run left to right, but I'm going to teach you a secret. All of these boxes are optional except for one. There is only one box that you have to put information in. You'll notice with all these boxes empty right now, and we go brain dump, which is where you start with your ideas, genre, style, synopsis, to characters and outline, and chapter 1, which each one of these is a silo, meaning they don't know what the other one is doing. And there's a beat section and a prose. If I click generate the beats, it says, oh, there's no entry and outline. If I try to click prose, it's going to say, please write commands first, which means beats. So it's telling you that the box that you have to put something in to start with Story Engine to do anything is this outline box. Now, the outline box has a specific format. It's this Act 1 hyphen introduction. Introduction could be any word you want. Then it could be chapter 1, chapter 2. It could be chapter 1 through 10 if you want, especially if you're writing hint, hint, like a long saga that's spanning 200 years. So you can organize your acts and your chapters however you want to. They just have to be in this format, and you can only work in the outline form in 1,700 words at a time. So I'm going to go ahead and start typing in Act 1, Introduction. And let's pretend I know very little of, like, I've done my research and everything like that. This is one of the ways that you can use Story Engine to kind of pants and also really very closely stick to the details that you have. As you can imagine, as you start filling in these boxes, there's the chance for you, the human, to actually create a conflict or an inconsistency in the logic. And when that happens, sometimes you'll find that the beats or the commands aren't generating the way that you want to. So I actually find that sometimes I have more success with Story Engine controlling it at this level than filling all these boxes in and trying to make it remember all the facts. Instead, I focus personally on trying to make it know, like, I treat it like a security clearance. It's a need to know basis. What is the information it needs to know for, say, chapter 3? I would only give it that information for chapter 3. So for the genre here, we're going to go with historical saga. You said England, right? English history, Jay?
Yes.
England.
Yorkshire.
1400 to 1600 Yorkshire. All right. I'll come back to the style box in a minute here, because we haven't started to write our prose or our beats. Go ahead, William.
What's the relevance of the commas and not commas in things like the genre and style?
The comma is just for the human. Yeah. So for the AI, it doesn't really matter, because it looks at it as tokens. So each individual word is just a token. Now you can bracket things and things like that to help signal that this stuff goes together, but it's still looking at that data as like at the individual token level. And if I wanted to ever see what that tokens look like, what that looks like to what does it look like to the AI? Because I think that that's helpful to understand. I'm going to go to an OpenAI tokenizer. And this is a free tool that's available for everybody. So this is what I think is just wild. So we have this tokenizer. So I just pasted that in. It's actually 9 tokens. The comma is a token that it knows. Now the token IDs, this is actually what the computer sees. The AI large language model actually sees a bunch of individual numbers separated by commas. So this is why a comma is really irrelevant as a separator. If I really wanted to separate things, I could do, let's say I wanted to do a pipe. That didn't change it. Oh no, it did. It did put in between 220. Oh, the 220 is a space. It was an extra space.
So how do you manage concepts in something like this? So historical saga is one concept, England, Yorkshire is another concept. How does it know that they're 2 different things?
So it knows that they're 2 different things because down here, it understands when it gets fed the 10,034 and 12,409. It understands those tokens to be historical saga. It also is calculating how close they are. And also it knows, it was fed a bunch of training data that knows how the numbers 10,034 and 12,409 typically interact with each other and what they mean.
Okay, last question here is, would sentences help it understand better or worse?
It helps it better because watch what happens if I watch what happens when I put a sentence in here. King loses his throne and his family, and I put a period. A period is actually 13. See, there's a 13 right there. So when you start putting in the 13s or the periods, then the AI starts to understand these tokens a little bit differently because it's, again, fed on data that it has seen this token 13 a lot of different times and what the context and what kind of information it learned from and everything like that to understand how these numbers interact with each other. It's really just very calculated word algebra.
So wouldn't it make more sense to be historical saga dot England 1400 to 1600 dot Yorkshire dot?
Because humans don't typically put the information that way. So all the training data that the AI had, that is not how that data was put. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I'm trying to relate this to what I understand about large language models. And to me, okay, cool. Thank you.
I agree with you. So I often butt heads with the people who are more computer science based because I learned the large language model stuff innately. Like I'm actually a really good prompt engineer because turns out I'm fluent in robot. So I can make prompts work that people can't. They're like, this prompt is broken and I can fix it.
Yeah, so I'm the computer engineer and trying to understand it from a large language model at the same time.
Yep. So a little bit like you, I took a book out for recess and things like that. Not because people were just dumb to me when I was younger. And then I kind of figured out how to entertain them. And then I started to like them more. So basically I find that it's this weird juxtaposition between, coding and computer science and loving literature. And then this like overlap of the Venn diagram is where you can really start to kind of figure out how these large language models are working. So I typically put stuff in a way that makes sense for a human because it's going to match the training that the AI was fed on so that it understands these tokens, these sequences of tokens and what kinds of contexts it most often saw them in. But yeah, a comma really doesn't make a whole lot of sense because like you say, it separates all the numbers by like you saw, it separates all the numbers like a comma. All right, any questions from anyone else about the tokens? Was that helpful to understand that this is really just a dictionary slot machine? It's literally just probability pulling the numbers. So context matters. Okay, so next, we're not going to do synopsis. We're not going to do characters right now because I'm just going to do the bare minimum. So here is where I could actually put in historical facts about somebody. I'm going to do Queen Elizabeth I just because that's somebody I actually do know. So that I did a lot. So 1558 to 1603 was her reign, but I think she was born in 1623. Yeah, she was 25 when she took the throne. So and where was it? It was in Hertfordshire, I think that she was when she was like as a teenager. So you could do a young Queen. Well, let's do this. Let's not use Queen Elizabeth because that's a historical figure, and then the AI might know more about that. So I want to show historical writing when it's just a character that we create. So a young woman of semi-noble birth is growing up in the country where her father is keeping her from joining court. Sound good? The year is 15. Since you're going up to the 1600s, we'll go 1589. I'm just giving it, basically I'm brain dumping inside of the outline, which is what you can do. This is the opening of a family saga that will show the family's rise to prominence over the last 150 years. So there are hints that the father is, let me see, 30, 60, so that's 2, is 5th generation with his title. Please invent from Yorkshire. All right, let's see what it does. So I just have that information. The conflict in this chapter is the young woman is now 17 and her mother wants her to go to court to be married. Her father opposes. Okay, so if I click generate the beats, it's literally generating the beats on no information except for this right here, and then what I have in the genre box as well. So that's the only information I'm giving it. When you're first learning how to use Story Engine, I recommend testing it out with some of the very basic pieces, because then you can start running experiments of like, well, what happens if I change this? What happens if I change that? And that's how you can start to get a feel for how it works. Go ahead, Casper.
You got me saying that it's do, what, and how.
Yep.
What is the how in this done? I can see the do and the what.
So a Story Engine, I did not put the how because I know that it's baked in on the back side. It's already told how it needs to do this particular box. So anytime you ask it to generate a box, there is actually a how that's in the back end. There is a how on the back end. Now, some of the how is right here with the genre, believe it or not, because I've told it that it's historical saga and Yorkshire, England, 1400 to 1600. Over on the right-hand side, you can see that it's going to pull in that information. So right here, vivid sensory details such as the smell of fresh hay and sound of birds chirping. So it's coming up with things that would typically be inside of a historical saga. Go ahead, William.
I've noticed sometimes it doesn't put in the drivers and the guardrails when you do a generate for the beats. Is there a way to help it get that right?
No, it's actually not supposed to. This is actually prompt leakage. Guardrail and drivers, or as I call them, gargoyles and dragons, were developed as a methodology to help the beats generate from the outline. This is actually possibly going away very soon because I'm presenting today, as a matter of fact, new prompting for the outline box, and we're working on some new prompting for the beats as well. As these models have been changing and as we have access to newer models, like gotta love 16K 3.5, we are learning that these the prompts and stuff like that have to be kind of refreshed every couple of months, where you start kind of getting different results than what you got at the beginning. Does that help, William?
Yeah, I actually like the driver and the guardrails. It helped me understand what was the goal of that beat.
You are one of the few ones, because sometimes when you run the prose with it, it doesn't make for good prose necessarily. Sometimes it can be a problem.
That makes sense. That makes sense.
But we'll see. We may end up having that be one of the, so I know that they're moving more towards like the idea of a drop down. So like for outline, for example, we're working on you being able to choose different models so that you can just do a drop down and go, I'm writing a Hollywood, like I want to save the cat type Hollywood sequence for my outline, or this is a saga, or this is a romance outline. Those kinds of things. Okay,
Does
so
it?
just go ahead.
No, I'll ask again later. Don't worry.
No, go ahead. It
No,
might not come back to you.
I'm changing the subject.
It's fine.
So I wanted to come back to my problem with the characters being used out of sequence.
Yep, that's one of the things I was going to talk about, and that is basically controlled in your beats and also your need to know basis. If there's no information about that character here and there's no information here, it can't possibly pull in a character because it doesn't have the information.
Yeah. Okay.
So that's the first way you can do it. The second way you can do it is you can validate your beats to make sure that it's not going to bring any of those characters in. One problem. Oh, go ahead.
They weren't mentioned in the beats, but they were included in the prose. But
right,
to leave them out of the character box makes sense.
Yep, that's one of the ways. And the other way is depending on which stride that they were in, I would take a look at those beats and see if there wasn't some sneaky kind of leap of logic that the AI might have taken to think that they needed to be in that section.
Yeah, because it had family and friends, and the friends weren't in the picture yet.
Exactly. So if the beat says family and friends, it's going to go to that character list to go, who's a friend, who's a friend, who's a friend? Ah, friend. We put them there. So it's pretty fascinating. It's like a junior writing partner who's overwhelmed all the time and comes up with some really interesting things, but they make problems. Okay, we have some questions in chat. Welcome, Matt and Mike. Oh, the room filled up. Good to see. Okay, on Midjourney AI, it can use brackets to put importance on one token that's needed to be prioritized. Yes, it can. And like I showed, like a pipe has a actual token number, so does a bracket, so does a parentheses. There's certain punctuation that does have a corresponding number. A comma doesn't, just because a comma is by the back end to separate the token. Okay, Michael. Say, for example, I'm a writer for PBS Kids. Can I use Save the Cat 15 plot points? How do I get the story engine to do that? You don't. You would need to bring in that plot. When we originally developed Story Engine, the thing that I advocated the most for, because I knew that we weren't going to be able to have drop-down outlines yet. I insisted that writers be able to bring their own outlines. So whatever outline format sequence you like, it could be brought in just with this Act 1, Chapter 1 generic kind of formatting, and you could use whatever beats that you wanted in terms of like critical moments or milestones in that story. But I think we're going to have Save the Cat pretty soon, just because people like Hollywood Beats, which is Save the Cat, it's just twisted so that an AI can understand it, so that we're not getting, Dark Night of the Soul every time means that the character's in some tower or something like that. It translates it for what the AI to understand. Okay, so let's talk about our beats here. I'm not going to make any changes whatsoever real fast. And we're just going to click fastest and make it go. And we're just going to look at that first stride. Now I'm going to click pause. Clicking pause means that it will run one stride, which is 2 beats. So it'll run beats 1 and 2. It'll always tell you what it's going to run right here. So it says 1 through 2. And we always want to write down type in what model we used, because as we make changes to that, it'll change the button and you won't know which silo was which model. So here we go. We have introduced Elizabeth, a 17-year-old semi-noble woman, and her family's background of nobility dating back 5 generations in Yorkshire, England. Driver, Elizabeth's desire to go to court. Guardrail, focus on the conflict between the parents and their daughter's desires. Establish the setting as a rural countryside with vivid sensory details, such as the smell of fresh hay and the sound of birds chirping. Guardrail, it should not reveal any major plot points or spoilers for the rest of the story. So if we come down here to validate, we have, she's in the right location. So we got that, that's a check. We have that fresh hay and the sun beating down. Okay. Wouldn't be most accurate or fastest if it doesn't bring in the sun. But you'll see that most accurate and fastest, because they are ChatGPT models currently, they're very on the nose. What I mean by that is it says the scent of fresh hay. If I was to change this to, let me just create a chapter and copy these beats over. If I change this, instead of the scent of hay, let's go the smell of fresh wildflowers of the wild garden. If I stick that in there, make no other changes, click fastest and pause it. you'll see it brought in wildflowers at the beginning instead of the hay. This is an important distinction that if you're talking about small, minute details, you need to put them in your beats. And if you're using accurate or fastest, it's going to pull that information directly into the prose. Does that make sense to everyone? How it changed wildflowers from hay, all based on this one little section of the beats, wild garden and the fresh hay. Okay, so we still have, this is one of the things that's kind of neat to run too. I think it's really helpful to run the same model on the same beats, just so that you can see how typical the AI will be with its selection of tokens, and why to get unique prose, you need to have unique beats. So those beats that I have, it's the same recipe basically. We basically took it as a recipe, and we have two different chefs, or even the same chef cooking it. It's going to kind of taste the same. We have a line here, Elizabeth, her mother's voice interrupted her thoughts, and she turned to see her mother approaching her from the manor house nearby. They changed that same, we still have that same thing of Elizabeth, her mother's voice interrupted her peaceful moment. So we know that if this was a human, if this was two middle schoolers or something like that turning it in, I would think that one copied the other and just reworded it. And in a lot of ways, that is kind of what the AI is doing. And that's why the information that you feed it is what is so important and what makes for the unique prose. Okay, so this one, it just kind of did the same thing, mother, but her mother's expression was stern. Your father and I need to speak with you. And it just kind of talked. Here, the characterization of Elizabeth changes a little bit. Mother, I don't want to talk about court again, Elizabeth said, her frustration evident in her voice. So we have kind of a similar, a very different characterization of this character. And that can also happen if we don't define who the character is in the character box. How many of you have run your beats and you've gotten different characterization from the person? I know, Manon, you've had this issue before where like it makes her 33 and then she's 40 in the next chapter. And it's because it wasn't defined in her character box how old this character was. So every time the AI was writing this character, it didn't have that information about the age, so it just inserted it. Okay. Yep.
Yeah, it was in my character that she was 45, but it didn't matter. It just changed her age.
Gotcha. And that goes back to sometimes if there's just too many details, there's not very many ways to put these details in a hierarchy, especially a few months ago when we had much smaller context windows. The AI models, it picks and chooses what, if you give it 20 details, for example, it may not necessarily process all 20 of those details in the one response. It's going to pick and choose which parts that data it needs for whatever task you're asking it to do. In this case, we're asking it to do a creative exercise, which is write prose. Any questions about how the beats steer the prose down below? Okay. And then it's also kind of an empty canvas in the sense that you can change how things are written. Let's go to the second one here. And instead of the driver right here, go ahead, Michael.
How you doing?
Hi.
Good. My name is Michael. I'm actually a story editor for PBS Kids, and I have just signed a contract to work at Disney to work on a Marvel show. I want to know, I'm trying to get ahead of the game. I know how AI is becoming a game changer, and these are meant to be tools to our arsenal as writers. So I'm just trying to be more proactive, especially that my career depends upon it.
Yep.
When it comes to beats, I use ChatGPT, but I found that Sudowrite as more articulate and more vibrant in its productivity and for writing. It's more geared to writing. So, but I have to use more of like storyboards and premises and very vague beats, and I know that it gives a lot of information. How do I lean more to Save the Cat and more towards like the hero's journey in constructing my stories? How do I get it to get more into the wheelhouse of that so I'm able to manipulate and generate more of those types of prose necessary? Because we don't use dialogue as much in the beginning stages of writing. We use more of all of the information, and then as it goes from premise to outline, from outline into first draft, then we start to put into dialogue. So how do I get it into more of that for my purpose, if necessary? If not, I understand that you have to do what you got to do.
No, it's okay. We have a small class today, and I'm happy to show some of the more nuanced individual needs here.
Good, thank you.
So you're talking more of like you just want summary, no dialogue.
Yes, yes. Like overall, like if it was a premise, like usually when we have to submit premises to the studios,
Yep.
it's really 1 page to 2 page. It's written in prose, but no dialogue.
Okay, so that I would actually control in my style box. And I would say, studio treatment,
Mhm.
all narrative summary, no dialogue. The plot events. So that's what I would put as my instruction there for style. Let's come back over to create that same chapter 1. We'll copy this over. And now just to make sure that it's actually going to listen to this, I'm going to use a section that a lot of advanced users call the header. It's not actually a header, but we call that the space above the beats, where you can put into brackets more specific instructions about how you want it to write. This is what I was talking about, where if you give the AI 20 pieces of information, there's no hierarchy. One of the ways that you can kind of enforce a hierarchy is by repeating. If you repeat the same command or the same piece of information 2 or 3 times in the mega prompt that gets constructed from all of this on the back end, it helps to signal to the AI, oh, that's really important. Or what actually probably really happens is that it's just there more often. So that way, it's a better chance of it getting picked up. It's at a higher percentage. So I'm going to say narrative summary only, write for a studio treatment, no dialogue between characters. Okay, and let's see what it can do. We'll try fastest again. If that doesn't work, then I'll use most accurate.
Okay.
So I'll click fastest and I'll press pause. And there we go. We have no dialogue. And now it just has that summarized information. Is that more in line with what you were looking for?
Yeah, that's more in line. Usually we would give it more like a generalized beats of escalating problem, because it's essentially what we look for in a story. Because my name is Michael Olmo, just for the sake, if anybody wanted to know. I was a story editor for a show called Work It Out Wombats for PBS Kids.
Yep.
And as a story editor, one of my jobs was to see what a problem for most stories is. We have an initial problem that a character causes through a main flaw of themselves. So the flaw is generated from themselves. They cause this problem. The problem escalates 3 to 4 times, inherently becoming worse, until a character meets its lowest moment. And then from that lowest moment, they have an eternal realization that this flaw that they lived their lives that they didn't think was an issue, all of a sudden now they come to this realization of it. And from that realization, they end up finding out what the solution is. They alter their navigation towards what they were trying to do to fix the problem that they caused, and now they have the solution behind it.
Yeah.
So any way to make it escalate, like we could visually see an escalation of a problem.
You're going to have to control that. So again, it goes back to what you put in your synopsis. If your synopsis starts to go from the beginning to the end, and you're really talking Blake Snyder's Save the Cat kind of methodology there, and stuff that goes back. We do actually have Hollywood Beats in our Canvas tool. I don't know if you've been to Sudowrite 101 or not yet.
No, I haven't.
So
No.
we do have another outlining tool that has Hollywood Beats, which is what we call the Save the Cat.
Yeah.
Because it's twisted. It's twisted so that the AI can understand it. That I mentioned at the beginning. I'm actually doing work right now to bring those outlines into outline format so that you can click a button and you can get more of that style. But you're going to have to control your dialogue and everything like that with your style box. And I'll put this into chat for you, so that you have it for what we did to keep it kind of a studio treatment, and for anyone else who wants it as well. And then the other thing that I did was I put it into the header. All right, does anyone else have some specific questions for them for what they're trying to do with Story Engine? Story Engine can be a very blank canvas if you understand how to prompt it and how to get the different mechanics of it to work for you. So I'm glad we were able to make that work. Go ahead, Don. Hi.
Good morning. Hi. Just a real quick question. So are you sold on only putting 1 chapter at a time into the outline?
I'm not sold on it necessarily. I find it's the fastest way to teach it in the morning, to teach it everyone, because when I originally started teaching story engine, because I'm going to show these other boxes here very quickly, I started at the left to the right, and basically nobody knew what we were ending up trying to do, and I would get a bajillion and one questions for these boxes, and I wanted to be like, just let me get to the boxes, you'll see the magic in a second. I find that when I start over here for teaching it, everybody understands a lot better now. This is where this system falls apart. Like, by the time you fill in these other boxes, when you get to this part, if you just are phoning it in and going, let me just use what the AI gives me, you're not going to necessarily get great results. This box right here, the beats box, is the #1 place that you should put yourself into to spend the most amount of your time if you are a plotter and somebody who is very like, I have a very clear idea of what I want my story to be. If you don't have a clear idea what you want your story to be, then yeah, run these beats. Use the fastest model so you can see what it looks like if you want to, and see how that works and see if that works for you. I want to show the other 2 models real fast. I meant to do that, but does that help answer your question, Don?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay, so we have this narrative summary. I'm going to go ahead and click the trash can, which will delete this silo. It'll say, are you sure you really want to do it? Because if I delete this silo, it's gone. If I wasn't sure that I wanted to delete it, like maybe I wanted to use this later, I could always click the copy button. And once I click the copy button, I can come out of Sudowrite. And just in case I want those beats for later, I can go, paste them in here, and I could put that these were treatment style beats or something like that, so that I know what it was that I was trying to play with. Coming out, I liken my job sometimes to just being a secretary for the AI. Now, I will say, she'll point out this bug a little bit. When you leave Story Engine and come back, your silos will be reorganized. They'll be reorganized. When you're first starting with it, it's organized left to right, like the one that you did the longest time ago to the newest. When you come back, it brings the newest one up front, or it starts to rearrange them, so to speak. So you have this one core one that doesn't change, and then everything else, it rearranges it based on when was the last time it was run. So let me delete this, or when it was created. And I'm also going to delete this one that was the wildflowers. Nope, that was the hay. Okay, so this is the one I want to delete, the wildflowers. Okay, so we have our core original one here that has the hay. Let me go ahead and create the chapter and create another chapter for chapter 1. And I will copy these beats again, because if I change the beats, then obviously I'm not just showing the different models. So Story Engine has 3 different models. I've already shown you the fastest. Right now that's hooked up to, I think, 3.5. That may change in the future. So as I'm telling you what they're hooked up to, please don't necessarily go 6 months from now. Elizabeth said it was 3.5. 6 months from now, it could be a completely different model that is connected to fastest. So that's why they went ahead and made the buttons descriptive rather than specific models. So this time I'm going to go ahead and go most accurate. Most accurate is the slowest. And I'm going to go ahead and click pause right away. And the reason I'm clicking pause is so that it'll only run 1 through 2. If I don't click pause, think of this like a tray. It's a tray of information, and the AI is going to go through it all if I don't press pause. And there's no way to stop it in the middle. You have to stop it, and it has to finish out that stride. And that got changed because there was some, I already saw my problem. Does anyone remember? You'll notice this is very different, isn't it? Even without the header, it's still doing the studio treatment style. And that's because I left in the stuff that we had about our style. So the style box was doing the heavy lifting on that. So let me take out the style box, because when we ran the first one, we didn't have anything in the style box, and that was important. Any box for negative prose style. What do you mean, Matt, for negative? So negative prompting doesn't actually work very well in the large language models like it does in Midjourney. So basically it turns it into a toddler. I'm going to click restart so that it doesn't have any of that information, where you told it not to write about an elephant. And so it's going to be like, I'm going to write about the elephant. I'm going to write about the thing that you told me not to do. And that goes back to the tokens. It understands these tokens as individual concepts. And so if you say, no elephants. It may not necessarily, it may have an oversight situation where it misses the no part and goes, oh, she wants elephants. I will give her all the elephants. So I teach people that instead of negative prompting, like if you want to say, don't do dialogue, try to also come up with the opposite positive thing where I said studio treatment narrative only. So I gave it the positive command to do the task that I wanted it to do. And then I also do include the negative because it'll come up with it. But there's been many users that they'll just say no dialogue, but they don't give the AI the other side of that of like what you actually want. And so what they end up with is still dialogue because it just didn't understand what you were looking for. Does that help answer that question about negative prompting? The other source of negative prompting is that they've been experimenting with is putting in parentheses here, guardrails, and saying guardrail : focus on the conflict between the parents and their daughter's desires. Or right here, it should not reveal any major plot points or spoilers for the rest of the story. For this particular guardrail, even if I was going to use it, I would immediately change it and say, focus only on this one moment in a time or something like that. So I would even pair it with a positive instead of just a negative. Okay, so here we have most accurate compared to fastest, because remember I did label it. So I always label it here, most accurate. And we went from an opening line of Elizabeth walked through the fields of her family's estate in Yorkshire, England, to the rolling hills of the Yorkshire countryside stretched out before Elizabeth's eyes, a vivid tapestry of green and gold lined with ancient hedgerows. So it's a very different writing style. This is the difference between two models. That's the only difference that I've changed here. These are recorded. There's a question in chat about if these sessions are recorded. They are recorded. I don't control over when it goes up to YouTube though. All right, so that was most accurate. We do have a lot more detail in there. And then one other prose model that we have is best prose, which is currently connected to Claude. Claude is a love or hate him situation. You either love what he writes or you don't love what he writes. And he is owned by Anthropic, for those who have never heard of Claude. Oh my goodness, that's interesting. I accidentally started to type in this and it caused that typo. The AI didn't do that. I was trying to put the label in there and it just put it in. That was interesting. That was my bad. Sorry about that. I've never done that before. Mostly because I've never tried to write well. I don't know what I was thinking this morning. This is what happens before coffee. Okay, so here we're going to put best prose. And then personally, I like, I'm going to restart this because I think that it kind of got hiccuped when I tried to type into it. I will let them know about that. And there we have the morning sun. The court is no place for a girl like you. You'll be ruined. I don't really love this. You'll notice that there's zero conflict from her mother. We are just focusing on Elizabeth and that she wants to go to royal court. And this is the thing about Claude or the best prose. Sometimes it has a tendency to look at your beats and go, I don't want to do that. And I'm going to do this own thing. It has that's why it's not called the most accurate model, because it's not the most accurate. It has a tendency to read the beats and do what it wants to do. All right, any questions about best prose or most accurate or fastest mode?
Is there situations where one is better to use than the other? Is there a reason to have different ones?
There's a couple of reasons. Number one, there's authors who like one versus the other. There are people who will fight you for best prose and to keep best prose. And then there's other people who prefer most accurate. The other thing that you would want to do is if I'm trying to write something that's very flowery and I really don't care what happens in the scene, I just need it to be well written, I would probably use best prose. So if I'm less clear about the story things that need to happen in a story, I would use best prose. Personally, I use both. And what I will do is I will take pieces of this one, pieces of that one. And I actually have a prompt for the AI in Playground where I bash them together. So I let the AI read both samples and I tell it to rewrite the scene using the best writing from both samples.
That's a nice one. And fastest?
I'm sorry?
And fastest?
Fastest, I like fastest if I'm trying to check if my beats make logical sense. So especially like if I'm tired and I've been hammering on beats and I've done a whole bunch of changes to it and everything like that. I like fastest because it can take a while for most accurate to run. Most accurate is the slowest one, but if my beats have looping in them, it's and this is because I also don't worry about the words either, like because I'll just buy more words, or I have a lot of words because I do a lot of work for Sudowrite. But if you are working on it professionally, sometimes it is more work to fix a whole like 2,000 words where there's looping and stuff versus if the beats were just right from the get-go and there's no looping inside of the prose.
So to me, the most accurate is too verbose, and fastest is too disjointed. It's almost like we're missing something in between. If you look at the fastest, they're all like one-liners, but when you read most accurate, it's like these are the sort of books is the reason I don't read difficult stuff.
So the way you can kind of tweak that is with your style box. So let's try that. I'm going to run the fastest again, and we'll put it side by side. And I'm going to say, because I know fastest leans on very lean prose and everything like that, I'm going to say, write very descriptively in a style of a 19th century author, but updated for contemporary audiences, contemporary readers.
But write very descriptively is a very standard ChatGPT comment.
Yeah.
I've used it a lot as well.
Mm-hmm. So this is just off the cuff that I'm trying to figure this out here for you. Let me go ahead and create a new chapter, and we'll paste in our beats. And copying and pasting does not charge your words at all. So I'm not getting charged 556 words off my quota again every time I copy and paste them in, only if you click generate. And we'll click fastest, and we'll generate, and then we'll pause just so that we get 1 and 2.
So talking about that, is there a way to just regenerate beats 5 and 6, for example?
There isn't really. So that's where this kind of breaks down a little bit. And that, like, if you're going to go to that level of nuance, you're going to want to use kind of regular Sudowrite with your write and your rewrite and your guided write.
So can you take the prose then into normal Sudowrite and ask it?
Absolutely. So I think this is already a little bit better than the original one. So the original one was very on the nose.
Now.
Huh?
Except we have chickens now.
Yeah, well, that's fine. This is exactly what I wanted. I wanted something that was more like putting you in the realm of the I'm at the space or anything like that. Come Help Me with the Chickens puts me more into the place than what was it originally, was just like a generic Elizabeth, I need to talk to you or something like that. Yeah, your father and I need to speak with you. This is a very throwaway, I have no idea where I am or what line I am, and then the Help Me with the Chickens is better. But if it's still not enough, then I can click send a doc. And once I have sent it to the doc, it just brings it to the Sudowrite. It doesn't send it to like a doc, a Word document. I always like to note what model it was. You can always grab this paragraph here and click rewrite and do more descriptive or more inner conflict or more intense. So let's see what more intense looks like, just for curiosity's sake. This is where you can kind of dial in kind of that different things that you want. Now, one way that this system particularly works is you want, because part of the prompting is it's looking at it, it's also looking around it. So the more that you can have it more like your voice, and then you're asking it to make changes down at the bottom. So if I've already written a chapter, sometimes I'll copy and paste that up at the top here, and then this will be the next chapter, because the AI on this side it actually reads up a little bit, and it'll try to match the style that's already there first and foremost. If it's not there, then it won't. but if it is there, then it'll try to match that. And this is what we had before Story Engine. Okay, before any other questions about beats, the last little bit here, I want to show how these other boxes work. Okay, so I'm going to create a new document, a new project. Can delete and go to Story Engine. And now we're going to pretend like I have no earthly clue on what on earth I want to write about. So I can literally just put YA fantasy, and this is the other application that that Story Engine does. This is where I'm going to actually use these boxes to help pull the story out of me. It's like almost like an interview in a way. So the brain dump can be absolutely anything I want. So we were talking about YA fantasy. I think that's what William writes. Yes, Lindsay Baroker. Okay. So YA fantasy, introverted character has to go outside his comfort zone for the adventure. Did you want to make it steampunk or no?
Indirect bullying.
Indirect bullying.
I had an interesting experience where if I write articles about computer science, I get 20 to 30 likes on LinkedIn. If I write a story about bullying, I get less than 5.
I'm sorry, if you write about computer science, you get what?
30 likes on LinkedIn. But if I write an article about bullying, I get less than 5. So it's like something I want to highlight a lot more.
Okay. So it's a running joke. What is the premise of the fantasy that you want for this?
Anything. Don't worry.
Okay.
That's a good start.
A weird new magic is spreading through the land, making the chickens die. So we'll bring in the chickens from the last story. And we click generate. So the synopsis box is going to just read that brain dump. And it's a very thin brain dump. I mean, as far as brain dumps go, I gave it very little information. It also hasn't named our protagonist yet because it doesn't know our protagonist's name. If you know the name of your protagonist, you should put it in the brain dump so the synopsis can do that, can put that in there. So we have here, magic is commonplace, comfort zone, travels deeper into the unknown, the conflict rises as he has numerous obstacles, bake this up. Setbacks, the sorcerer is defeated, very common trope. I don't know if Michael's still in the house, but hopefully he's able to see that with a very generic brain dump, Story Engine will give you just very, tropey beginning, middle, and ends. If you want to rewrite this, my first suggestion is to use your own hands because those don't charge any words or anything like that. If I click generate again, it's going to charge me again for the words. Also, if I use this rewrite button, if I'm not doing a lot of rewrites, so if I like this and now I want to go great, keep what's there, but make these changes. The protagonist's name is Marvin, and the evil sorcerer is known as...
I have to say it comes up with better names than I ever come up for my characters.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just coming up off the cuff, Gabriel. And other characters. So if I ask, I mean, I'm asking it to make a bunch of changes. So in that case, Sarah and Tom. And a brave warrior named Kira.
Make them elves and it'll give them proper names.
Make them what? Oh, elves. Yeah, so you can make changes to this. What you can't do is go, well, I guess you could say the elves and then say rewrite it to add in more details from the beginning to the rest. But we'll go with what it has for right now. What I often do for synopsis, if I'm playing in Story Engine or if I'm playing with ChatGPT and stuff like that, I ask for a pitch and a hook. So that's one of the ways that's an advanced topic for just personal usage here. I like pitch and hook, and then I tell it remove all marketing lingo and actually give it a decent ending, an unexpected ending, and then it'll do that. And then that's what I use for my synopsis. I find that coming with a stronger synopsis makes for a better story engine experience. If you start, oh, we have Willowbrook. So one of the things that we always make fun about is that Willow Creek was like anytime we asked for a small town, the AI would come up with Willow Creek. And if you ask for top 10 names of small towns, they would always put Willow Creek in the top 10. So I used to make a joke that we're proud citizens of Willow Creek circa 2023. So we have Sarah Brightwood and Tom Blackthorne and Stormheart and Lightbringer. So it's understanding we want fantasy, and these are very generic fantasy names. You may have a different naming convention if you want to. So for example, this is cool. Watch what happens if I say great. Ancient Northern England. Britannia, go ahead. Oh, I misspelled it. Well, it'll figure it out. This is what I took 4 years of Latin 4 faults, just so I could know what the Romans called the ancient pieces. All right, so now we have Oak Shield. Now we have I can't say it. Thorvald, Ingrid. There's Ingrid. Hey, Ingrid, you're in the story now. Magnus and Gunnar Dark Shadow. So you can kind of control it a little bit with the rewrite characters. If you want more influences on the names or something like that, you can give it that influence.
So how does it know that Sarah and Tom are now Sigrun and Thorvald?
Just decided that because I said rename them. I
Yeah,
was like, great.
But when you get to the next step, the synopsis and the character names are now out of sync.
Exactly. So you would actually need to make those changes on the synopsis or just delete the synopsis entirely. So if you wanted to do that, the other way that you could do is you could grab this. This is an advanced trick. So rewrite the synopsis to take this characterization into consideration. So now, no, it did not do that.
I mean, each time we click on rewrite, it's going to change a lot of things in our synopsis. I tried that before and kind of changed the whole.
There we go. Now we're doing that. It's a little bit better. The other way that you can do it too is you could also take this out, come over to brain dump. Throw your characters into brain dump and then generate the synopsis. It's got to take everything into brain dump into consideration. So, and now it's bringing those names into it. And it says often tease him for his introverted nature, but they care deeply about him. So this is one of the more advanced ways that you can move back and forth between the boxes and kind of make the boxes get back in line with each other. Once it's done though, I would take this out of the brain dump. And the reason for that is because there are parts of Story Engine, such as the beats, that take brain dump into consideration. So if I have the characters in there twice, we've already talked about this, it will start to really skew everything based on, because the characters basically got double mention in the mega prompt. So when it says that this section is generated based on, the mega prompt is looking at all of these different pieces, all of these different boxes when it's going. So now our original synopsis was pretty thin. now we have that's not the synopsis. Now we have very specific information here with the characterization. If you ever wonder, this little clock button right here, if you ever click it, it'll show you the history. So here we have a really good opening, like a very good, a better like initial scene of them in their normal life before the adventure starts. Quiet librarian, company of books to people. His friends Sigrun and Torvald often tease him about his introverted nature, but they care deeply about him. Despite Marvin's reluctance to step out of his comfort zone, fate has something in store for him that'll force him to just do that. Strange new magic. The original is back here. In a world where magic is commonplace, we meet our introverted protagonist who prefers the quiet life of reading books and avoiding social interactions. This isn't a bad line, but it's not very specific. Here I actually have characterization that's going into the synopsis. So, and the cool thing about this is that it'll keep your history. So if you decide a synopsis that you tried using didn't work, you can always go back. And now I'll click generate on the outline. So again, the outline is going to be very, hero's journey is kind of the default right now on the back end. And now it is, I have my work cut out for me, because one of the problems with this is that because the initial prompting is chapter 1, show the character in their initial state, very often it comes up with something that there's no activity happening in that first scene, which works great for cinema because you can do that scene where the camera's going in and it's interesting because there's people on the screen. But for book writing, usually we want something happening in that first chapter, right? We want some action. We don't want Marvin and the quiet library of Eldergrove reading books. That's not going to work for the beginning of a novel. Go ahead, William.
So the other thing I've noticed is that it seems to always do 12 chapters, which is very short.
Yes. It was just because we had to pick some number. And so they picked a number of 12 to start off with. The idea of outline is that it is not intended to be the best outline. It is just intended to be an outline. The best outline, truthfully, is what you bring.
So I have noticed that if you do rewrite, it's very good at changing the number of chapters.
Yes, the rewrite box is something that I presented to them about 2 weeks ago and showed how no matter what I did, it's very difficult to come up with a prompt that is universal enough to make everybody happy, because everybody has different chapter lengths and stuff. But putting a rewrite box on there, you could just give it instructions to rewrite that outline, and that's a shortcut to keep people from having to take it to another AI source or something like that to rewrite it.
But if I do rewrite 30 chapters, then I find the chapter content gets very, very small.
Yeah, so this goes back to what the model can and can't do. So if you were to prompt any AI to say, take this information and write me a 50 word chapter or a 50 chapter list, it is only going to be able to respond back with about a max of 1,000 to 1,500 words at the moment for the best models right now. It can't respond back with that many words that you would need for a very rich 50 chapter outline.
So is there a way to get it to add in content for the chapters?
Not
Extend the
particularly with this
content?
tool. You could do it yourself, or you could start working in Axe to just write in Axe is what I would do.
Yeah, that's what I've done. Is I've taken the synopsis and characters, put them in in Playground and in ChatGPT, and said write acts.
Yep. And again, it goes back to, you want 50 chapters. If I took a poll right now, how many does anyone else in the room are they writing books with 50 chapters?
I did 30.
I'm sorry?
30, 30.
Oh, 30. Okay, got it.
Yes.
So yeah, some people write 30 chapters, some people write 24, some people write 36. It just depends on what ratios and stuff that they like for the different
So
acts.
the reason I got to 30 was I looked at what the standard is for young adult fantasy of 75 to 100,000 words.
Yep.
And if you're doing 3,000 words per chapter, you need 25 to 30.
Yeah. Other genres, if you were writing epic fantasy, you would not be able to get away with 75,000 to 100,000 words. You would need to be in that 150 to 200,000 word range. I write
So
historical, I write Regency romances. So my sweet spot is actually that 50,000 word to 70,000 words. I actually don't sell
Yes.
better with a longer book.
Yeah, I was just trying to manipulate it to get to what was expected.
Yep. Okay, so then the last thing here is that we have all this information for the outline. Normally what I would do is I would go ahead and combine chapter 1 and chapter 2 into one chapter, because we have this cool information here, and then we have the actual thing at the beginning. So here we'll have after work where they read quietly. So we'll just leave that as where it is right now. Then I'll click generate for the beats, and we are right back where we started, everyone, where we were just working with the beats. So this is kind of the end of class. I just wanted to show the outline, and the beats are really where it's at in terms of the main engine part, the core of the engine. But these other boxes are ancillary, and they do help and support this work here. You can either generate them, or you can bring your pieces to the party that you want to have. So you can write them yourselves, as long as you keep the format. So here we have introduced Marvin Oakshield as the librarian, and he's categorizing books, exceptional skills, reluctance in joining friends, reading quietly. So you can click this, and you can click fastest, and we'll let fastest go ahead and write the entire prose. So I want to show you guys that if you ever have any questions about anything, you can always hover over the question mark, and it'll tell you information about that section. So in beats, for example, each beat should write between 100 and 200 words. So this scene could be anywhere between 1,200 to 2,400 words once it's all done. And since I'm using the fastest, I'm going to go ahead and let it run, and we'll see how long we get. But this is where it'll go 1, 2, 3, 4. And these marks here are very helpful, because if when you're validating, when you're reading through it and seeing that it followed the instructions, the 3, 4 corresponds that section should respond to 3 and 4 in the beats list. Same thing with 5, 6. And then there we go. We're already at 9 and 10. Now there's a magician. Come on, let's go watch. Relax, my boy. You'll enjoy this. About what? About how different we are. I mean, I know I'm not as outgoing as you, but I appreciate you letting me be myself. I mean, this is so, I would fix the dialogue there.
Or don't use fastest.
I'm sorry?
Or don't use fastest.
Yeah. Or don't use fastest.
So
There's another application of fastest too that I forgot to mention. There's some authors, and I can appreciate their process. They actually don't want the AI to write for them. What they do is they generate the fastest, and then they use that just as like a zombie draft that they're then rewriting. So they're just using it as an example text. And so it's almost like they're a developmental editor, and they have a client who's like a really bad writer, and they like as a ghostwriter to the AI in a way. So they're taking the really bad writing from their celebrity client, and they're rewriting it so that it's better. And their writing process before AI would involve them drafting multiple times. So they're using AI to make that crappy first draft that they then can springboard from, and that's what their process needs.
So one of the things that I found very difficult is the numbering in the beats. So if I wanted to add something in between, so here we've only got 12 beats, I wanted 15. To add in between number 2 and 3, I wanted to add in a scene. And then you got to renumber everything. I found that very difficult.
So the solution on that is that why I use my beats in a spreadsheet. So on the spreadsheet, one column, I have my numbers, and on the right side, I actually have my beats. And that way I can rearrange them, add to them, and insert cells and renumber. And then I can just copy and paste it into Story Engine, and it'll have the numbering. If you want something in between, honestly, the hack, don't care about the numbers. Because let me do it up at the top here, because it's a better way to show it. If there's hard lines, it's actually going to treat this as the second beat, and I'll show you.
Okay,
let's say,
that's fine. I understand.
Have a dragon attack the library. Okay, so let me create another chapter, copy these over. So this is the hack. Generate fastest, and then I'm just using fastest because it's easier for demonstrating purposes. So 1, 2, here's the dragon. See? and it didn't go to categorizing books. Let me go to continue so you can see 3, 4, and then I'll click pause. Now, well, we have a problem in the fact that we have a dragon, and so we actually don't get to see them categorizing his books, because that's not what you do when a dragon comes after you. So 3, 4 is completely influenced by the fact that I put have a dragon attack the library, and 3, 4 actually became 2, 3. And there's nothing about obscure text here unless I do something of what they were doing. So now if I continue it, it's going to think that it needs to do. It still understands the attack from the library. And now they are on 5, 6, which is, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Quiet demeanor, and then the 2 close friends. So there we go. Marvin hesitated. He knew he wasn't the most social person, and the thought of being in a crowded place made him uneasy. But he also knew he needed some distraction, something to ease the pain. So, because he was attacked by a dragon. All right. Thank you, everyone. Everyone have a great day. Bye.